Hello, it's Ren Presents time. I'm your host, Ren, and today we continue with the House of Bloodstein, Perlamum, Chapter 15, The Professor. When last we visited our intrepid heroes, they were off in Zaffin space investigating the hard planet Mare with its legendary ring, and as they found out, the ring, per legend, is made of thousands upon thousands of zombies wearing spacesuits, who are just sort of floating around in a ring. Who put them there is unknown. What they do if you get too close is also unknown. They got a little too close. Sarah demanded Kay bring one into the ship using his sight, which he did. The zombie woke up, its machines and tanks started churning fluids, it started roaring, and he put it back where it was. And then it activated all the other zombies in the vicinity, and therefore they also activated zombies in their vicinity, and then eventually the whole ring was alive with activity and was coming for them, and they were just sitting there as the doom slowly approached. And Sam was beside herself, like, let's get the hell out of here. And everyone was sort of just like sitting around, and she's like, I'm gonna have a freak out. I am gonna freak out unless we get the hell out of here now, and which they did. And they returned per Kai's orders to Blanchefort, and they're gonna have a think session with her husband, the professor. If you follow my books, you know that Lieutenant Kylo, since book 1, married her childhood neighbor. He was kind of a smallish fellow, but very smart. He wanted to go to school in Tusk. They didn't have the money, and Kai joined the Stellar Marines to try to earn the money so that he could go to school. Eventually, he was noticed by Captain Davidge, Lord of Blanchefort, and Captain Davidge sponsored him, which, basically gave him a scholarship under his credit to go to school, and he turned out to be a heck of a student, became a professor there at the University of Tusk. He also became well known for his ability to find answers to difficult questions. He's been called on many times by Captain Davidge and by Kai to get them answers. Now, he is indebted to Captain Davidge, so he gladly helps him out. To all other people, he's kind of a tart, salty character, except, of course, to his wife. His wife, he'll do what his wife asks if she asks for a favor, but the moment she leaves, then he's gets kind of salty. In the original book, he figured out where Countess Sigillis had been taken by Princess Marlith in their battle in the Triumph. In book 5, he was instrumental in locating the Temple of the Exploding Head. He figured out where it was, or he figured out within a pretty small radius where it was, and if he had had another day or two, he would have homed right in on it. He's not magical in his ability to get it. He requires a little bit of time. He needs to do research, but he almost always gets answers. And his opposite number on the other side of the league is Hannah Ben Sherlamp, EVOR, Professor of D, and she's sort of like a negative image of him, where he's working for the good guys. Hannah Ben Sherlamp is working against the good guys, if the situation calls for it. His name has never been revealed. I have never said what his name is. He's just the Professor. Sometimes he's called Professor A to Z, or as my Canadian friends say, A to Z. It's A to Z. But he usually just goes by the Professor. Kai knows what it is, but whenever someone asks, she says, don't ask. He is purportedly, and Sarah brings this up all the time, a member of the Hertogs. And the Hertogs is a sect of renegade scholars, poets, tailors, professionals, basically, who don't necessarily cotton to the sisters' version of things. And they're a secret group, and they released a book called the True History of the League, which contradicts the sisters' authorized version of the history of the League. And the sisters read this, and they're like, come on out, let's debate. We'll have a debate. We'll talk about these points you bring up. But the Hertogs are like, no, if we show our faces, They're gonna capture every one of us, torture and kill us. So no. So the Hertogs are, they're just group of, it's hardcore being an academic in the League. You know, it's not for the faint of heart. So these Hertogs are this shadowy group of disaffected scholars, and he's supposed to be one of them. Whether he actually is or not is unknown. Let's begin, shall we? Chapter 15, The Professor. 2 days later, they were back over Xandar, the Sparrow high overhead and safely cloaked. To Sam's chagrin, they checked up on number 6. She was fine, sitting inside the Xandar 44's villa, and elated that Kay was so worried about her well-being. They resupplied Sam's medications, for she was getting low again. Sarah got into yet another argument with the merchant at the pharmacy. Moving on, they left the Sparrow cloaked in high orbit and continued back home to Castle Blanchefort in the Goshawk. Sam was relieved to be back on Cana, no longer chained to the fistfuls of medications required to maintain her health in space. Phillip and Thomasina moved into the rather smallish but impeccably decorated Makara Tower at the north end of the castle, just off the Palatine, where she always stayed during her visits. She liked the view of the courtyard from that tower. After they'd refreshed themselves and rested up, they saw Kai in the Capricos Hall and fully briefed her on what had befallen them. Kay handed over the disc taken from Wilhela. They then followed Kai into Pendar Tower, where her husband awaited on the 100th floor. Kai's husband was a great man from Tusk, a dogged researcher and teacher. He had access to knowledge and information that they could only guess at. He had an odd name. Nobody other than Kai knew what it was, and she wasn't telling. He was simply known as the Professor, and preferred it that way. Sometimes in public circles, he was referred to as Professor A to Z, which he didn't like much. He preferred Professor, and that was all. He was a thin, smallish man about Sarah's size, lost in the fullness of his teacher's robes. He was handsome in a modest way, with a calculating gaze. He was a closed person, full of secrets, so unlike the heart-on-her-sleeve, earthy Kai, his wife, who towered over him. The Professor also wasn't very sociable, and if Kai wasn't around, he could be a rather tart person, except to Captain Davidge, whom he owed an eternal debt. However, with Kai and his infant son in the room, he was perfectly agreeable and under her sway. His equipment occupied 20 floors of Pendar Tower. Even more floors were taken up with his relics and collected trinkets that could fill a medium-sized museum. Kai's stuff, in comparison, took up only 2 floors of the tower. He was a little man with a lot of things. His terminal was bare wires and grinding gears, replete with blinking lights and a faint but persistent burning smell that filled the room. Wires, pipes, tubes, and hoses all pushed into a haphazard, unattractive blob of clinging technology and culminating in a nondescript and rather antiquated keyboard, a bare-naked flex reader, and a hollow emitter. He didn't even have a glyph controller, very quaint and old-fashioned. The wires, struts, and other bits and parts of his rig made their shapeless way into another room like a bloated egg sac of some gigantic spider, taking up much of the space on the floor. They sat on couches before him. Sam, free of the rigors of space, was feeling her normal self again and had changed into a loose cyan evening gown and comfortable sandals. Thomasina, wearing one of Sam's Snugs medallions to protect her from the cold climate she wasn't accustomed to, wore something similar. She had several closets full of spare clothing for her visits, mostly in green. Sarah was still in her shirt and had taken off her duster and laid it over the arm of the couch. Kai, tending to her son, wore comfortable Tusk clothes, her sleeves rolled up to the elbow. King and Kai's famous 20-year-old Tweeterbird perched in the upper reaches of the room, shedding light like a pair of silver candle flames. Tweeter seemed to want to play with King. King, however, was fluffed up and rather unsociable, not budging and paying Tweeter no particular mind. "What sort of terminal is this, Professor?" Phillip asked, puzzling over his gangly jury-rig setup. "It's a custom working of my own creation. There are parts from 1,000 different types of terminals here, all combined into perfection without the austerity of a compact form or pleasing cabinet. The rig-up works, unabashed. No glyphs to control it all? Phillip asked. Glyphs are for devious minds and capricious hands. Kai sighed. It's no Naris thing, Phillip. You don't see a whole lot of hologlyph system controllers on a Naris. Too Canaan and pretty for us. I have one in my office terminal down at the bar, and I actually like it a lot. Now I'll never use anything but a glyph controller ever again. She sniffed the air and bounced Sebastian on her knee. Your rig-up smells like it's about to catch fire here, hun. Quite, darling. It's working as designed. If it didn't smell a little, I'd be concerned. Can you work on that, please? I don't like the idea of our son having to breathe in fumes. There is no danger. Yeah, I don't care. Fix it, right? That was the end of it. The professor noted something down on a pad. He then took the disc the four had retrieved and stuck it into his flex reader. Wilhella's holographic list popped back up, floating in midair. He saw the Jester listing and dialed it up. NXY477A Edam. The Jester has been hidden in the Zaffin world of Mare. Seems to be the case, Kay said. It was horrible, too, Sarah said. The dead body came to life right in Kay's hands. The professor pressed some buttons. You saw one? Yep. Kay pulled it back with his sight, Sarah said proudly. Phillip chimed in. It was clothed in a primitive-looking pressure suit and a clear helmet mounted with an antenna. It attacked Kay, Sarah added, and he was really tiny to boot. The professor considered this notion. I've heard that the mysterious inhabitants of Mare have developed a novel process for the preservation and partial reanimation of corpses. Of course, the ravages of space will out in the end. Therefore, the need to shield the bodies from the vacuum is clear, but other than that, they can float around up there as long as needed. The one I fetched came to life after a minute or so, Kay said. And then it appears to have woken up the whole lot as the length of the ring came to life in turn, like an angry beehive, Phillip said. The professor examined the data and considered the situation. You were wise not to go forward, as you most likely would have been killed. Yep, and then I would have gotten yelled at by both your folks, Kai said, burping Sebastian. So then, Professor, how do you suggest we proceed? Phillip asked. We know the Jester is located at Mare in the ring. Do you have any thoughts as to how we go about fetching it in a reasonably safe manner? The professor thought a moment. Clearly the key is the Oberphiliac sitting in the grove. The machine? With that device, the distances between space and time may be bridged. Yes, Kay said. However, the machine in and of itself is merely a bridge. It cannot create a portal to Mare, and my sight will not extend that far. Well, of course it won't. You will need a portal opening to Mare. Once you have that, you'll be able to pull the Jester through, and then close the portal nice and neat. That would make things rather convenient. Unfortunately, we don't have such a device handy. Actually, you do. I have a device here in my collection that will do the job nicely. They all looked at each other. So then, may we borrow this device? Kay asked. The professor turned away from his keyboard. I could let you borrow it, yes. However, I would not be doing you any favors. Why? Because you are being played for a fool right now, Lord Blanchefort. Come again, sir? He said. The professor turned to Kay. The Lady Bloodstein's tale, as related to me by you, does not wash. Did you check into her story at all? Did you research it? I mean, really, the notion that a crass Zaffin family like the Bergens would have command of such a far-reaching power going back into antiquity is simply ridiculous. And if the Bergens were, in fact, locked into such a tragic circumstance, it would be common knowledge amongst the major Vith households. Wars have been fought over such things, with the various families rallying round each other. The Bloodsteins, though morose and a little odd, are still Vith, with many Vith friends. The Vith would not allow such a heavy, ongoing, and outlandish debt to be maintained in perpetuity, especially from a traitorous family whom the League Vith here on Cana hate, namely the Bergens. Here's what I think, given the data you've provided. You have several notable players at large here. You have Lady Chrysania, who clearly has misrepresented herself, though to what degree is unknown. You have Rothaba of George, whose part in this is also unknown, though her presence in Wohella's temple suggests she is involved to some degree. She did say we were being lied to, Kay added, and you thought it unimportant to question her further. We were a little preoccupied at the time, Professor. The professor continued. You also have Wohella Corman Grand of Wham, who has made great sport running Perlamum trustees about in the past. It's common knowledge in Zaffin circles that she has a Perlamum set once belonging to the notorious Queen Gome of Tremble, and keeps it in circulation at all times to see who comes calling on it. Just one of the many games she enjoys playing. I didn't know anything about that, Thomasina said. You have to keep your ear pressed to the sordid details of the Zaffin underworld, which I make a point to keep abreast of. The Zaffin underworld can be a veritable stinking gusher of information. Certainly a proper lady such as you would not invest herself in such things. So, Lady Chrysania saying that it was her Perlamum set hidden by Wohella Corman Grand is an out-and-out lie. I checked the piece we collected on Xandar. It has a Bloodstein coat of arms, Sarah said. Look a little closer, Sarah. It's a Bloodstein COA, but it's charged with livery that hasn't been used in a very long time. Queen Gome of Tremble is often argued to be of Bloodstein roots, the professor said. He continued, and then there are the Wonderlucks and Scrib Tiffin, Portator of Shook. The House of Jocanda has been eager to restore its honor after the ill-fated war on the Sisterhood. The Wonderlucks are one of the more vocal offshoots of the house. Wherever they go, they create a stir, intentionally so, in search of frontage. They are attempting to refill their coffers with both bought and stolen booty. They've been arrested several times and been excised permanently from certain areas for their bravado. Such attention seems to only encourage them, and despite their rather meat-headed methods, they have managed to collect a fair amount of swag. They have staked a claim on the Oberphiliacs, by the by. That got Kay's full attention. What? They claim that they quested for it and successfully secured its retrieval. What a bunch of lying Joe-boys, Sarah cried, equally enraged. We secured the machine, not them. If I see that Clara chick again, it's going to be a hard day for her. Kai laughed. Oh, what's the matter, Sarah? Can't take somebody trying to steal a bit of your thunder? That's right, I can't. I have a mind to take a hollow of the machine and post it and say, here, Joe boys, here's the machine. We've got it, not you, so go pound sand. Sam pointed at her. We made a pact, Sarah. Nobody will ever know we have the Olno. I went to my death protecting the machine. Sarah stewed. Yeah. She fidgeted in a huff. Don't let the Wonderlucks get to you, the professor said. They are adept at that. Kai noted Sarah's black eyes. Yeah, Sarah, don't worry. I'll save you from another beating if they happen to show up again. Sarah was hopping mad. I bet that Clara chick's not looking too good today herself, and I know I cracked at least 2 of her ribs with my fists. The professor chimed in. All humor aside, the hiring of the Portator of Shook is troubling. He is a capable man, despite his antics. How is it he can't be killed? Phillip asked. It's some arcane process. Some say he has an elder vessel guarding his life. Others say a goddess fell in love with him and he was made immortal. Not likely, Sarah said. Whatever the case, he is persistent. With Shook involved, you may rest assured he won't be giving up. If he shows up, we'll just kill him again. We'll kill him all day long if need be, Sarah said. Now the High-Tath aspect troubles me the most, the professor said. Countess, you said you saw the High-Tath skulking about in the grove? I did, near the servants' graveyard. She must have been gathering intelligence for Rothaba, Sarah said. Possibly. Kay was eager for counsel. How do you recommend we proceed? I suggest you return to Bloodstein, confront Lady Chrysania, and demand answers, the professor said. I shall get my device ready for use, should it be needed after you have roundly questioned her. We'll leave in the morning, Kai said, and this time I'm coming. No, Kai, I'd say let them go alone, the professor said. Lady Chrysania clearly hoped you would not be involved. she sent the message to you, but appears to have anticipated that you would not personally participate. Your presence will set her on her guard. What we need at this point is unvarnished data, and you charging in over there will prevent that. Something odd is clearly afoot, and I, for one, want to know what it is. And with that, we conclude Chapter 15, The Professor. Pretty short chapter. Now, in the writing of any artistic pursuit, whether it be a book or a film or whatever, people's processes for accomplishing that end are different. Some people are outliners, note takers. I am none of those things. I just keep it all in my head until I'm ready to put down on paper. The side effect of that is sometimes I'll change my mind in midstream, or I'll come up with a key concept or notion, and I gotta go and change everything. So when I originally wrote this book, The House of Bloodstein, it wasn't 2 books, it was just 1. It was also very different. And this whole notion that Lady Chrysania isn't necessarily trustworthy was not part of the original setup. She was completely trustworthy. Her trustworthiness was never questioned. She was honest to a fault. She was plucky and determined and had her tournament with Rothabah of George. And as I stated way back when these readings first began, I absolutely hated the result. It was like an ABC after-school special. There was no real drama, no real conflict, no tension or anything. It was just basically collect the MacGuffins, the Perlamon pieces, give them to her, and let her win her tournament against an evil foe. Very ABC storytelling, very by the numbers, and it weighed on me like, this sucks. This sucks. No, I'm not going to do that. I need to come up with something cool, and I put this book on the shelf. And remember, this was a NaNoWriMo project, so I was actually just churning out words at that point. I was, which is why I'm a big critic of NaNoWriMo. I just don't like that. I put it on the shelf for about a year. I don't know how long. It was at least a year. And I even considered just hitting the delete button. Like, just flush this. It's not worth it. And then a few key concepts became utterly clear, and that completely changed the book. Got back to it, continued writing, and eventually I had enough material for 2 books. So what that concept is will become clear later on. If not in this book, then in the next. In the initial draft, this Professor chapter didn't exist because Lady Chrysania's trustworthiness was never brought into question. She told no lies. She sent them on no wild goose chases. And that is severely in question here, whether Chrysania can be trusted or not. And we will see next week, Chapter 16, Return to Bloodstein, where they go to have it out with Lady Chrysania and see what the F is going on. I would include, as this is a short chapter, I would include that reading with this one, but it's kind of a longish chapter, so that would make for an agonizingly long video. So next week, we continue with Return to Bloodstein. Anywho, this is Ren Presents. I'm your host, Ren. Peace out.